Well, hello internet people. I bet you can tell by the size of my cabbage that we're making medieval sauerkraut. So sauerkraut has been around for a couple thousand years at least. One of the fermented foods that probably came to Europe through China. But Pliny the Elder said that it was good for nursing mothers, and it was good for headaches, and it was good for dull eyes, and it was a good hangover helper. So if you drank too much, eat some sauerkraut, I guess. We think of it today as a German food, but pretty much every northern European country had their version of it. The French called it Sauerkraut, and the English didn't have a word for it, so they just called it sauerkraut. But pretty much everybody has it. Only two ingredients, cabbage and salt, and it makes its own brine. Today we're going to be doing it in a stoneware vessel. Back in the day they probably would have done it in an oak bucket or an oak barrel, or a clay pot, you never know, but you can just do this in a glass jar, like a 1 liter glass jar or bigger if you've got it. But yeah, let's cut open some cabbage and show you how it's done. So I got about 5 cabbages today. I'm just making a small batch for me. But basically, if you've got any damaged leaves on the outside, you can take those off. What I like to do is flip it upside down, take my big knife, just cut into it like so, cut it in half, and then quarter it, and then just take the heart out of that stem piece, and then you can just give that to the crows or whatever. And then after you've got it processed to that level, you've got to start slicing it up. And if you're smart, which I'm not, you can do this with a food processor, but that's not what I'm going to do. So once you got the core of the cabbage out, basically all I do is just cut it into slices like so. And you can do it however you want, but it's not rocket science. Try not to chop the ends of my fingers off. There we go. So what this does is it creates lots of little strips like this. If you want smaller, finer cabbage, you can cut this again, and that way your sauerkraut pieces aren't quite so big. So you can process it pretty much however you want. So I'm using this old stoneware crock. If you use one of these, it's probably a good idea to make sure that it's not lead glazed on the inside, because your sauerkraut is going to be kind of acidic, and it's going to leach the lead out of the inside. So it might be better to use a modern crock, or reuse a pickle jar. So basically all I'm going to do is layer in a bunch of shredded cabbage, and then I'm going to mash it down with my hand. You could use a stick for this, or take the end off a rolling pin. But yeah, once I got enough cabbage in there, I'm going to take some salt, and quite a bit of salt actually, and I'm going to layer it up. Some of the more modern recipes for this say that you want to mash the salt and the cabbage together with a stick or with a masher, and let it sit for 15 minutes and then pack it in a jar. And some modern recipes say that you should add caraway seeds to this. I don't even know what a caraway is. I mean, I've got some and I've done it, and I can't really tell the difference. So I don't know, I just do it this old-fashioned way with a layer of kraut and a layer of salt, and Usually the salt pulls out enough liquid from your cabbage, depending on how wet the growing season is. Normally the salt pulls enough liquid out of the cabbage to provide you a good brine, but if not, you just make yourself a brine with like a spoonful of salt, a spoonful of water, and you want, you know, a couple inches of moisture over top of your cabbage. Another thing that can happen, what's going to ferment this is lactobacillus, I guess. They didn't know that back in the day. They just knew that you put salt and you skimmed off the mold. But yeah, you can get mold started on this. I guess the mold they call bloom. Yeah, you want to skim that off every day, just because. Put in the rest of our cabbage here. Every last bit. So there we go. Might as well just use all of this. Lots of salt. And then I'm just going to mash that down with my fist. So that's one cabbage. And 4 more to go. So I got 4 of my 5 cabbage in this 2-gallon pot. You don't want to have it too full. And I've just taken the handles off of my rolling pin here to use as a masher, because I haven't made one yet. I only make sauerkraut once a year, and I don't make that much, so I don't need a dedicated masher. I just do this. So yeah, 4 cabbage in there, and this takes the better part of a box of salt to do this much. Get the salt in there, get her all spread around, and then do a final mashing with my mashing stick. And that's all there is to that. So now we're going to check this every couple of days. To make sure that the brine is forming, the salt is doing its job and pulling the moisture out of the cabbage. And if there's not moisture and water over top of the cabbage after 3 days, I'm going to mix up some salt water brine and throw in there on top, because we don't want the cabbage exposed to the air. We need it to be under water at all times. And so to that end, I'm going to put a board on here with a rock on it or something, a weight, just to keep the cabbage down. And yeah. We'll check it in 3 days, and it should be done in, 3 weeks to a month. Anyway, we'll see what we'll get then. So we're back, a month and a half later. I've grown some hair on the face, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 liters of sauerkraut out of that. I had another jar with a little bit in it, but I ate it. But yeah, this is what you can expect to get out of one of those 2-gallon crocks. As expected, every day there was mold growing on the top, so I had to spoon that off. The great thing is, if you forget about it for a day or a weekend, you just get more mold, and you spoon that off. So in medieval times, if you were a medieval person, you'd be spooning that off every day or every other day, and you'd be eating it straight out of the bucket, or straight out of the barrel, or straight out of the clay pot, whatever you were making your sauerkraut in, probably a barrel. And yeah, you'd be pretty careful not to touch the brine. They didn't know anything about germs and bacteria, but they know that the mold would get worse if you touched it or dropped things into it. So they'd have been spooning that off every day and likely adding more water. It's 2021. I don't have to do that. I got mason jars. So yeah, these mason jars, they don't require refrigeration. In fact, they'll continue to work in these mason jars until you use it. So one of the good things is once it's in there, you're not going to get any more mold. The store-bought stuff that comes in jars is typically pressure cooked. But yeah, I just took the top off of this, and there's a little bit of bubbly action, so this is still working. Absolutely no mold. So yeah, I think the next chance I get, I'm going to film a video doing a little medieval recipe with this stuff and see what that tastes like. I like it as is. You can put it on just about anything. Goes good with pork and sausages and such. You can cook it, you can eat it raw, do whatever you like. So, yeah, if you like the channel, feel free to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons, do all the things. Apparently they got rid of the dislike button, so you can't dislike me anymore. But if you do dislike me, share me with your enemies. I will punish them for free.